Good afternoon, my name's Damon Kowarsky and this is an exhibition I'm part of together with my partner Hyun, and it's an excellent adventure. As close as I could get to Bill and Ted without actually treading on the old copyright. And prior to COVID we both travelled a lot, and most of the work is stuff that's come out of our travels, so it seemed an appropriate title. And also this year is a year when no one is travelling. Everyone's kind of stuck at home but dreaming of places, so I'll start with this. This work is by Hyun. She studied in India for many years and has, over the last couple of years, been kind of bringing together mythologies and religions from the West, from Korea, from India. So in this picture you've got Jesus, and Jesus appears elsewhere in the show as well. But you also have the carved marble screen, which is the kind of geometric pattern. That's known as a jali, and that's from the Indian subcontinent, India and Pakistan. And those screens are often found in tombs and temples, and they allowed air to pass, but kept the heat of the day out. And India, Pakistan can get really brutally hot in summer. So it was a way of having a kind of porosity to the world, but retaining the kind of privacy of the interior spaces. There's actually a few with jalis. That's also called jali, and that has a similar kind of geometric pattern. And again, she's bringing together the jali, which is from the Muslim architecture, the Mughal architecture of India, the Ganesh of Hindu mythology, and also Mary and Jesus, which is Christian mythology. So she's trying to find, I guess, syncretism between these major faiths.
Your works really fit together well. So is that because you're...
She taught me everything I know.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I know. I'm lucky. Yeah, I mean, we go to the same places. We are both printmakers, so there's the kind of, the materiality of it tends to draw work together and makes it sit. But also, we're working side by side the whole time, so there's a lot of overlap with ideas, but at the same time we have quite separate practices. So.
Do you have studios in the same...
Oh yeah. Kim's in the lounge room, I'm in the laundry.
And how does that work? In the laundry?
Wow, it's an old house with a kind of annex sleep out, you know, the kind of tacked on laundry. It's a large laundry, it's got louvered windows, good natural light, and Kim's taken over the entire lounge room. So.
Was there any discussion about that? Or...
Oh no.
No,
it just happened.
You just know your place.
Well, I'd been in the laundry, and look, as a printmaker it makes a lot of sense, because if you drop stuff on the ground it doesn't matter, and it's well ventilated. But yeah, Kim needed more space. She'd been on the kitchen table for a while, and then branched out.
Okay. So this exhibition is all print, or...
No, it's prints and drawings. So the drawings are coloured pencil.
Oh, which ones are the drawings?
The drawings, so this one is a drawing.
Wow. Okay.
That's a drawing.
That's a drawing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Patan is a drawing. Patan, which is a district of Nepal. Kim was living in Kathmandu for about a year, and she was quite high up in an apartment and overlooking this sort of temple garden. Made that drawing. And then my drawing of, it's called Long Mountain. We were in Mauritius in March, just before the catastrophe happened. And Mauritius is a volcanic island, and the main city, Port Louis, is surrounded by these really strangely shaped old volcanoes. It's just a totally bizarre geography, because you've got these tropical beaches and then these really lush jungles going up to these black basalt, stark mountains. Geology quite unlike what we have here, and because it's volcanic it's fairly recent, so you've got much more verticality than when it's old geology and it's kind of rolling hills like we have in Victoria. Yeah, because I mean the Western Plains is also volcanic, but it's way ancient, which is why everything's softer.
Your edges on these drawings, have you drawn all the way to the edge?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Have you torn it down?
No. I drew all the way to the edge.
Really?
We learnt that in art school.
Wow. Okay.
People were very...
Have a look at this, guys.
It was very much that you're drawing... If you're drawing with a sheet of paper, you need to include the materiality of the paper and kind of not just give out, but actually make the whole thing work. So yes, drew to the edge of the page.
But you've not only drawn to the edge, but you've finely detailed on the edge as well.
I'm an artist on the edge.
Yeah, artist on the edge. I love it. That's incredible. I thought you may have torn it.
No, that wouldn't really work because the fibres of the paper would kind of fluff up and you wouldn't get that effect. Also, you'd be a very brave person to spend a month drawing and then tear. I couldn't do that. All these drawings are first underpainted with watercolour. So you're building the colour pencil on top of a light watercolour wash, which makes the colours much richer than if you were working straight against white paper. Most people who work with colour pencil work just on the paper, and you always have that sort of porous, illustrative quality to it because there's not the depth to the colour. But by putting watercolour underneath, pencil on top, you can really build up the tones and the colour.
Incredible.
And you were asking what kinds of pencils. I mean, there's a range of... They're all artist quality pencils. Really the best ones are the Faber-Castell Polychromos and our brush Dura. The Dura is a water-soluble pencil, but we don't use it as a water-soluble pencil. We use it because it's slightly softer than the Polychromos, so that you can kind of... It's as with painting, lean to fat. So you start with your dry pencils, your harder pencils, and you move up to the greasier pencils.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's real process.
Yeah, and again, that was all stuff that I got from Kim, and all the colour pencil drawings in the show are underpainted first.
Wow.
But even the colour of the underpainting doesn't really matter. I mean, you're approximately in the same spectrum, so green if it's going to be green, but it's just the fact of having something underneath, not white paper, that gives you the richness. And you can totally change the colour. So if you can move from the underpainting to another colour. Better not to, but it's possible. But just as long as you don't have white paper.
Do you have an idea before you start, or do you
Oh
just
God,
let
yeah.
it flow?
No.
Sketch?
So I only work from drawings that I've already made. So we were in Mauritius, we sat down at the base of the mountain, drew for a couple hours, and then I brought that drawing back to Australia, just little in a sketchbook, and worked it up. Kim will bring together many different drawings and plan it quite meticulously before she starts. It wouldn't be feasible to just invent this on the fly. There's so many references, there's so many things happening that it does need to be worked out. And also because you're doing the watercolour, then the colour pencil, you've got to know approximately where everything would go. We're printmakers, and printmakers tend to plan. Also paper, unlike canvas, it's not infinitely malleable. You've got a little way to go backwards and forwards. You can erase, you can redraw, but you can't do that more than once or twice. So you've got to be fairly deliberate about what you do from the beginning.
So your surface erodes?
Oh God, yeah. The surface won't last. I mean, it's art quality paper. It's a heavyish paper, but even with that, it's not going to endlessly be able to be erased and redrawn. With, say, charcoal, yes, you've got much more latitude, but colour pencil, because it's greasy, it really sort of gets into the fibres and it's more difficult to remove.
What's your favourite part of the process?
Finishing.
Finishing?
No, look, there's different stages. I mean, The planning stage is great because at that point it's perfect, and it's all sort of downhill from there.
Yeah.
You know, it's fantastic in your head. You've just got to get it out into the world, and that doesn't always work as easily as you'd hope. But drawing is much less process orientated than printmaking. So what I really like about print is that you can kind of divide up your work pattern into when you're doing just physical stuff, when you're doing the really hard creative ideas-based stuff, when you're transferring information, which is still creative but less kind of intensive. What I find exhausting about drawing is that you're constantly at that kind of mark making. You're constantly having to be totally present to make sure everything's right. Whereas with printmaking, you can kind of occasionally step back, and to use a cooking metaphor, sometimes you just got to chop up a lot of onions and you're not really thinking.
Okay.
But you've got to do this sort of mechanical process that makes the finished product. But while you're doing that, it gives, I mean, at least gives me time to think about what I actually want to do with the print later on.
So your print, that's really interesting. Can you tell me about those?
Yes,
Both of them?
both of them. We're both printmakers. We studied printmaking at university, and all these prints are etchings and aquatints on copper plates. So you take a sheet of copper, you put a very thin layer of bitumen over it, you scratch through the bitumen to expose the metal. The exposed metal, put it in acid, that digs lines into the metal. And then because the ink is very sticky, it stays in the lines and not on the surface of the print. So it's the opposite of relief printmaking, where you're carving away the white lino-cut wood block. And it's a very old technique. It was really developed in the 15th century. Dürer was one of the early proponents of etching and engraving. And we are still going with it. It's got remarkable longevity as a technique.
If you had to choose between printmaking or drawing, could you? Or
Printmaking.
no? Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Why
No,
is
it's. I mean, part of it is that the process gives you more space to think. It's also that you can make a number of objects, and that's really nice in terms of being able to work and exhibit in a lot of places. So Kim and I tend to have shows all around the world, and with a print it's really transportable. You can just roll it under your arm, put it in a tube, throw it in the post. So it's very portable, it's very democratic, and when it works, it's just you can have these really unexpected, accidental, beautiful things happen that you didn't quite plan but are lovely. And again, the materials are beautiful. You're working with exceptionally high quality inks, really richly pigmented, dense pigment. So there's just this beautiful quality to printmaking, and people who like prints tend to just get addicted to it.
Travel seems to be a big part of your work.
Huge part.
So do you make art to travel or travel to make art?
It's tricky. The two things kind of started happening at the same time. But when you travel, you're looking all the time. It's what, you're out there, you're on the street, you're looking at stuff. So there's a kind of parallel between what you do as an artist, which is looking, and travel, which is looking. And also you go to places, you see things that you never would have expected or anticipated, and it's extremely fresh. So it catches you. I mean, when you live in a city, you tend to sort of walk around and you don't really notice much anymore because it's become familiar to you. I remember I was studying in Glasgow back in '97.
Wow.
And when I first arrived, the walk from my home to the studio took about 2.5 hours because I was noticing everything. Like everything was new, every tree, every piece of concrete, every drunk, But then by the end of my time there, I was there 3 months. It only took 15 minutes to walk to school because I'd filtered it all out. I mean, to remain totally observant all the time is hard work, which is why when you travel, you're exhausted because all the information is new. But drawing is kind of the same thing. You've got to be really paying attention. The other thing is when you travel, you don't really have anything to do. You don't. There's no household stuff. You know, the kind of the distractions of home life don't exist. So unless you're drawing, what do you do with your time? I mean, yeah, you can sit in coffee shops, but that gets tired. Whereas if you've got your pen and paper and one of those little fold-up fisherman's stools, the days just pass.
So some of these drawings are live drawing.
They're all, for me, they're all live drawings, but then I come back to the studio and then turn them into etchings or larger drawings because the actual sketchbooks, only yay big because it's got to fit in my backpack.
Yeah. Wow. Do you have a sketchbook with you?
I do.
Is there any chance we could have a...
Yeah. Do you want me to get it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is the sketchbook that I took to Mauritius. That would be people at the airport flying home with coronavirus.
Wow.
God, that was a weird time. And that was the drawing I made in Mauritius of this scene, which then became this larger drawing.
Wow. This is incredible. Thank you.
No. And then, so that actually connects. Which is how you get that panorama thing.
Okay. So, why did you decide to do that?
Well, because I needed a longer drawing because the mountain just kept going. And you can kind of do that and then you just keep going. And I think this one actually extends this way as well. If I can find the connecting point. It's that little knobbly bit, which is ding.
Wow. And that is this drawing.
That is that drawing. And then, this one is an etching that I've actually made the etching. I'm going to be proofing it down at Portland Bay Press next week.
When you're looking at these, do the places come back vividly for you? Can you, or do you remember them through the art rather than?
I think when I look at it, I'm actually more thinking about what's the drawing doing? Is it interesting enough to turn into something else? Does it talk about subjects that I might be interested in at any point? As for memories of place, well, I'm not really sure. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. But mostly when I look at one of these, it's how can I use that for the next thing?
Is your art a journal of your life?
Some people say it is, but I don't think of it in those terms. I mean, I've got more than probably nearly 60 of those sketchbooks, but they're a resource. They're the visual reference library of everything I do. A couple of years ago, I went to an animation studio. It was actually Studio Ghibli in Japan. Do you know Studio Ghibli anime? They're fucking amazing. And they had all these books of reference stuff. So it was a kind of flip book full of dogs or cats or World War II vehicles, like whatever it was, but and 20, 30 pictures of each kind of dog in different poses doing different things, because it's very difficult to make stuff out of your head. And it makes sense that if you're going to be drawing, you've got the things you need to hand as visual references. It's easier now because we've got Mr. Google and you can do that. But in my work, I only work from stuff I've seen. So for me, the really hard process is converting the 3D world into a drawing in my sketchbook, once that's done, once that analysis has taken place, reusing that drawing somewhere else in a print or a drawing is actually quite simple, because I've done the hard work of digesting it. Also, I've spent hours at a place, maybe all day, so I've really got to know it. It's not I walk through, look at it for 5 seconds, take a photo, move on. It's got to be really considered to get a decent drawing. So I've absorbed it in a lot of ways, and also I've edited it, because you can't draw everything you see. It's impossible. It's impossible. So that what I'm choosing to draw or not draw is kind of consciously or unconsciously directing where the work is going.
Are there certain things you leave out always, like cars or?
Not. I mean, sometimes. I mean,
signs or?
People can be tricky because they wriggle. They do. Shocking.
Bloody wrigglers.
They do wriggle. They wriggle less now because of mobile phones. So they'll stand there for like 10 minutes doing this, or hours doing this. But it's trying to find a way to, if there are things in motion, how do you draw that? How do you draw moving stuff using the language of drawing, not using kind of the language of film, which is, say, the blur, but using the language of drawing. And there's nothing in this show that... Actually, there is. There is one. So the kind of transparency of a figure was one way I was trying to say that this... You've got an environment, a landscape, and then someone comes into the landscape, but they may only be there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And how do you show their transitory presence against the kind of permanence and insolubility of the architecture or the vegetation?
Is this a self-portrait?
No.
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 Okay.
Though he's got the same kind of stupid bag as I do.
Okay. It's one of my favourite works.
Okay, thank you.
Of the show. If we took these works to the place,
yes,
would we see what you saw?
You would. I mean, with print, I always forget to... Print flips everything, it mirrors it. And particularly when it's something that's a bit more recognisable, I usually mean to flip the drawing so that it comes out the way it should, but I always forget. And afterwards I'm like, oh no, did I do that again? So everything's kind of backwards to how you would have seen it. So that kind of removes it a little, but they're very much the places as I see them, and I'm trying to draw it as accurately as I can. But reality is really complicated and nuanced and knobbly. Like there's just so much there's so much detail and so much complexity in it that also, given that I've only got an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours to try and find a way to capture everything that's necessary to make the image work without having spent 3 weeks kind of labouring away at it. So there's always a balance between, is it lunchtime and what do I need to do for the drawing?
These works look like they take an extraordinary amount of time to make. What sort of time frame? Do you set a time frame?
No, you work until it's finished.
Yeah.
But I mean
Are we talking weeks?
No. Oh well, the large drawings take a long time.
Yeah.
That large drawing was probably a month. Kim's large drawing of Jesus was, I think it was somewhere between 3 and 6 months. She was going at that. That's phenomenal. The smaller etchings are a day to a day and a half to draw, a day to process and a day to print. So generally it takes about a week to make one work, and that's somewhere between a 40 and 90 hour week.
Yeah.
You know.
How do you stay focused? It
was really easy this year because we weren't allowed to do anything else.
Okay.
You know, we had 8 months when we were locked up. How do you stay focused? Well, I want the work to look the way it should, and that just takes time and care. And you can't fake it. You either do the work with the kind of detail and care, or you don't. Like, and you know, there's different ways of working, and really free, spontaneous stuff has its value. But if you want the detail, you simply cannot achieve that quickly. There's no way. So I've got a clear plan of what I want, and then it's drawing into that composition. Also, yes, you are working with a fine needle, but you've got a piece of copper of a finite size, and there's only so much you can do. There's only so precise you can get before actually the materials start to break down. So I mean, social media is really good for making connections with people. We discovered a really talented artist in France, David Ha, on Instagram, and then when we were in France a couple of years ago, I sent him a message and said, hey, you want to hang out? And we've become really good friends, and we've travelled together in India and the Balkans. So that kind of networking stuff is really good. As for what you're asking about, is there a kind of direct commercial thing? I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, so social media is, I think it's really important for making connections and getting your work seen by potentially a really large audience, and one that you can't necessarily predict. I'm not sure that there's a close commercial relationship between what you post and, say, sales. Occasionally it happens, but for me it's more about having that presence, making connections, and especially during the lockdown that we just had, when you couldn't visit museums, you couldn't visit galleries, you couldn't go to your friends' studios, and people, galleries, institutions who were creating a presence in that online world were real beacons, and it was fantastic to see that even with the kind of restrictions we had, that people were putting their art out there.